He is the most legendary dictator in the history of the Roman Republic and is also known as the founder of the Roman Empire. Although he never officially declared himself emperor, his name became synonymous with later emperors. After the Romans destroyed Carthage, conquered Macedonia, and secured dominance over the Mediterranean, the Roman Republic began to show signs of decline. Frequent political struggles, coupled with invasions from external enemies, led to chaos in the Republic's political landscape and society. People urgently needed a strong ruler to change the status quo, and thus, Julius Caesar emerged. Upon taking office as the dictator of the Republic, he dismantled the old aristocratic republican system and strengthened central authority. Caesar consolidated military and political power, effectively achieving the goals of a monarchical dictatorship within the Republic, and subsequently established the strongest empire in Europe, the Roman Empire. In 82 BC, Caesar was born into a Roman noble family. His father was a praetor, and his uncle was a consul. With such a strong background, Caesar had a bright future ahead of him, but all of this would be shattered on that day. Sulla emerged victorious in the civil war against Marius and entered Rome as a conqueror, at which point all power of life and death fell into his hands. He then forcefully suppressed the Senate. Afterwards, a proclamation was issued in the city of Rome, and the soldiers announced in public that those on the list would be put to death. Those who captured them would be rewarded, informants would be rewarded, and those who concealed them would be punished. As soon as the announcement was made, panic ensued. This was the harshest punishment in Roman history. Caesar checked the list and was horrified to find that his father-in-law, Cinna, was among those named. He quickly took his daughter, Julia, home and informed his mother about Sulla's occupation of Rome. Then he rushed to Cinna's house alone to tell him about it. However, on the way, he discovered that the arrests had already begun. Caesar dared not delay for a moment, but when he arrived, two informants coincidentally showed up at the same time. Seeing this, Caesar immediately urged Cinna to leave first while he stayed behind to confront the two informants. As he engaged in a fierce battle with them, a large group of Republican soldiers suddenly arrived. One of the informants accused Caesar of helping a criminal escape, and the leading general was Pompey. Caesar was then taken to prison, where people were executed on the spot every hour of the day. For the first time in his life, Caesar feels so helpless, and as a result, an inner desire for power develops. As he contemplated how to escape, the soldiers in the dungeon brought him before Sulla. It turned out that Caesar's mother had recently approached Sulla, hoping he would spare her son. Sulla had always held Caesar in high regard, so he offered Caesar a chance to live.
If you divorce your wife.
However, Caesar immediately refused. He was unwilling to bow to an enemy and did not want to lose Cornelia. Sulla was furious at this decision and immediately ordered Caesar to be executed on the spot. In this critical moment, Pompey stepped forward.
It's the ones who smile and flatter you should worry about.
Upon hearing this, Sulla unexpectedly released Caesar. However, after Caesar left, Sulla ordered Pompey to have Caesar executed the next day. After leaving the palace, Caesar was blocked by Pompey. Pompey approached Caesar to remind him to leave Rome quickly, as he did not want to see Caesar die at such a young age. He gave Caesar a ring, telling him that when the king of Bithynia saw it, he would naturally take care of him. Although Caesar did not understand why Pompey was helping him, there was no time to think about it. After receiving the ring, he boarded a ship to leave Rome. However, the ship had not gone far when it was attacked by a group of pirates, and Caesar was tied to a cross and left in the seawater. The pirates stated that to live, he would have to pay a ransom.
You get 50 for me alive.
After hearing Caesar's words, one of the pirates asked who would go to retrieve the ransom. Caesar then looked at his companions and said they would go to get the ransom. However, the companion never returned with the ransom, and the other party had lost patience. Caesar looked at the dagger pointed at him and took it as an invitation to a duel. The two then began to fight. But at that moment, Caesar suddenly had an epileptic seizure and fell heavily to the ground. As the pirates prepared to throw Caesar into the sea, a ship appeared on the horizon. The pirates collected the ransom and released Caesar. After this incident, Caesar continued his path of escape. During his flight, he received tremendous news. Sulla had unexpectedly died in Rome. Caesar returned to Rome, but what awaited him was devastating news. Due to her longing for him, his wife soon passed away. At that moment, Caesar was filled with self-hatred. All of this was due to his own weakness. Thus, before Cornelia's body, he vowed to everyone that he would never allow a dictator like Sulla to rule Rome again. Here, everyone would live in harmony, working together to build a stronger Rome. As soon as he finished speaking, Caesar received thunderous applause from the crowd, which made Pompey feel threatened. Caesar then began to slowly cultivate his own power using his family's influence. He was generous and never stingy with money, and soon his political influence became increasingly greater. With the support of the senators, Caesar was appointed as the Roman quaestor. However, Caesar was not satisfied with this. He wanted to gain even higher power. At that time, the supply chain of grain from Egypt to Rome was cut off by pirates, and the basic needs of the people could not be met. Panic spread throughout Rome, and the Senate urgently convened a meeting. Regarding the pirates, the senators unanimously agreed to send troops to suppress them forcefully. However, they did not know who should be assigned to carry out this task. Some supported Pompey to lead the expedition, while others opposed the decision to send troops. At this time, Pompey's power was already significant, and a victory in this battle would undoubtedly add to his achievements, making it even more difficult for the senators to suppress him later. As the debate raged on, Caesar suddenly stood up. He hoped that everyone present could set aside personal feelings to better resolve this crisis. Caesar did this to gain Pompey's support. Pompey did not refuse Caesar's overture. That night, Pompey approached Caesar, wanting to bring him under his wing and promised to help him gain higher power. The two thus established an alliance on the surface, and soon after, Pompey began his overseas campaign. After several years of fierce battles at sea, he finally eradicated the pirates and returned to Rome as a victor, receiving a warm welcome from everyone. Caesar watched all of this unfold, deeply shaken. He realized that power bought with money was meaningless. Only military achievements could bring supreme glory. Just as everyone's attention was focused on Pompey, Caesar had another seizure, and his mother hurriedly took him home to recuperate. When Caesar awoke, he expressed to his mother his desire to go on a military campaign. However, Caesar's mother stated that if he wanted an army, he could only borrow one from Pompey, and the main issue was that Pompey had no reason to lend him troops. Caesar fell into deep thought, unaware that his conversation with his mother was overheard by his daughter, Julia. That night, Julia approached Caesar alone and expressed her desire to marry Pompey. The real reason Julia did this was for her father's sake. She knew that Caesar had grand ambitions and that sooner or later, he would come into conflict with Pompey. If she married Pompey, she could at least tie them down, and it would be easier for her father to borrow troops from him. Seeing that his daughter was determined, Caesar reluctantly agreed. Not long after, Caesar approached Pompey to borrow an army, and then he began his campaign against Gaul. The Gallic Wars would become the most significant turning point in Caesar's life. After this battle, the peak of his life would begin. In 58 BC, as governor, Caesar led an army of nearly 20,000 men across the Roman border to launch an aggressive expedition into Gaul. Gaul was a vast territory in the northern part of the Roman Republic. At the beginning of the Republic, the Romans had been raided by the Gauls, so every Roman harbored deep hatred for them. If Caesar could conquer Gaul in this campaign, he would not only cultivate a large number of loyal troops but also gain the support of the Roman populace. To win this battle, Caesar abandoned the supplies from the Roman base, forcing his army to be self-sufficient. The Gauls were composed of many tribes and were not united. They were no match for the Romans. The Roman army advanced deep into Gaul. After 2 years of hard fighting, Caesar had conquered most of the territory. As his victories mounted, he began writing reports of his campaigns to Rome. This series of reports became known as the Commentarii de Bello Gallico, commentaries on the Gallic War. He narrated the entire campaign from a third-person perspective. His intention was simple: to attract his supporters and other Romans. However, when these reports reached the Republic, the senators began demanding Pompey to order Caesar to withdraw his troops back to Rome. Pompey did not agree, as he had supported Caesar's campaign in Gaul. Subsequently, Caesar began his advance into Germania and Britain. At this point, he had already become Rome's greatest conqueror, which significantly increased his prestige among the Roman populace. His abilities led many Romans to pledge their loyalty to him, including a noble named Mark Antony. Antony possessed exceptional military talent and was one of Caesar's most loyal supporters. By 53 BC, Caesar had nearly controlled the entire region of Gaul, with only the territory of the Helvetii remaining unconquered. Thus, the Roman army set out again, but while passing through a forest, they were ambushed by a group of well-trained Gauls. This battle resulted in heavy losses for the Romans. The leading man was named Vercingetorix. He was the last Gallic warrior and the most respected person in Caesar's life. When Antony reported this incident to Caesar, he was furious. This was the first time he had suffered such a significant loss since entering Gaul, so Caesar marched his army to the city. At this time, Vercingetorix had already taken refuge inside the city, preparing to defend it to the death. Caesar did not launch a rash attack, but built fortifications outside the city, adopting a siege without attacking strategy. preparing to wear the enemy out. Vercingetorix was well aware of his situation. If they launched a counterattack, it would be like striking a rock with an egg. All they could do was wait for reinforcements from Gaul. However, the food supplies inside the city were insufficient to last until the reinforcements arrived. To conserve food, Vercingetorix even expelled the elderly, women, and children from the city. For these people, the only outcome was likely to be a slow death from starvation. Meanwhile, the Roman army also faced food shortages, leading to conflicts among the soldiers in the camp. Caesar understood that he had to deal with Vercingetorix before the Gaulish reinforcements arrived. However, it wasn't long before the Gaulish reinforcements arrived. At this time, the Roman army had only 60,000 soldiers. Facing the enemy's attack from both sides, the Roman army had basically no chance of winning, but Caesar did not lose his composure. Instead, he calmly deployed tactics to his subordinates. He instructed everyone to vow to resist the Gaulish reinforcements on the left flank at all costs, not giving the enemy a chance to encircle them, while he would confront Vercingetorix directly, preventing him from attacking the main Roman position. As the Gaulish reinforcements arrived, a great battle was imminent. With the sound of trumpets echoing, the Gaulish reinforcements surged toward the Roman army's perimeter like a tide. Although the Roman army's traps and trenches blocked some of the enemy forces, the Gauls seemed undeterred by death, their offensive increasing rather than decreasing. Seeing this, the Roman army also refused to back down, but they still could not stop the frenzied enemy troops. The Gauls split into two groups. One group brought ladders to storm the fortress, while the other used battering rams to break down the outer wall. Despite every Roman soldier displaying great bravery, the sheer number of enemy forces ultimately allowed the Gauls to breach the outer city wall. The Roman army began to retreat, and the situation on the battlefield had become extremely dangerous. At this moment, Caesar was still facing off against Vercingetorix, determined not to let him unite with the reinforcements. Perhaps Vercingetorix saw through his intentions. He ordered an all-out assault on the walls of the camp. Meanwhile, the Gallic reinforcements had already breached the Roman defenses. In desperation, Caesar had no choice but to lead his troops into battle himself. However, the situation on the battlefield continued to deteriorate, and the Roman defenses were on the verge of collapse. Realizing that he could no longer maintain a defensive stance, Caesar chose to take the initiative. He immediately dispatched a cavalry unit to flank the Gallic coalition, creating a counter-encirclement. As the cavalry launched a surprise attack on the Gallic forces, the enemy quickly fell into disarray and was forced to retreat. Once again, Caesar demonstrated his military prowess, and this victory marked the complete subjugation of Gaul under Roman rule. The soldiers in the camp celebrated wildly, but Caesar could not find joy in their victory. He learned that his daughter, Julia, had died due to complications from childbirth, which also signified the end of his relationship with Pompey. As the defeated leader, Vercingetorix entered the invaders' camp alone, seeking a way to save his men. Caesar merely stared coldly at him without speaking. Seeing this, Vercingetorix had no choice but to remove his armor and prostrate himself before Caesar, making a sincere plea for mercy. As the leader of the defeated side, Vercingetorix entered the invaders' camp alone just to find a way to survive for his men. This scene caused the Romans to look on with a mix of respect and astonishment.
The men will live.
However, in the Senate meeting in Rome, Caesar had been declared a traitor because they feared he would become another Sulla. The Senate had never supported Caesar's campaign in Gaul, and they were even preparing to ally with Pompey against him. After years of hard-fought battles, receiving such a result made Caesar feel betrayed. However, he was no longer the same man. His years of warfare had not only earned him immense prestige among the Roman populace, but it also made him significantly more powerful.
I've made my decision. I'm going to Rome. I'm going to cross the Rubicon. Will anyone be coming with me?
As Caesar's army marched toward Rome, Pompey learned that Caesar had crossed the Rubicon River and that his forces would arrive in Rome in 4 days. At this point, the Senate and Pompey lacked the strength to confront Caesar's army. Therefore, they decided to leave Rome for Greece, where they would train their troops and wait for an opportunity to reclaim Rome. Thus, in 49 BC, Caesar entered Rome without bloodshed, returning to the Republic with the highest honors as a Roman general. The entire populace welcomed him, and among those returning with him was the captured Vercingetorix. Following this, Caesar walked to the center of the assembly, where his prestige among the Roman people had reached its peak. The now weakened Senate was forced to compromise and granted Caesar the title of Dictator. Just when everyone was immersed in this grand welcome ceremony, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared.
Beware the Ides of March! The Ides of March! Beware!
This made Caesar very confused, and he did not take these words to heart. Immediately afterwards, he led his army to suppress the Senate. As Caesar entered, they shouted, "Hail Caesar!" Subsequently, Caesar announced in front of the senators that his men would join the Senate. The senators disagreed, stating that this was against Roman law.
I haven't been selected by the traditional means.
The law has changed. And keep in mind, the people trust my judgment.
After dealing with the Senate's matters, he went to the prison where Vercingetorix was held. For this honorable opponent, Caesar did not wish to execute him outright, as he understood that they were both men willing to sacrifice everything for a common goal. However, Vercingetorix was determined to die. From the moment he had failed in his resistance, his fate had been sealed. Caesar just chose to walk away from it, and he was actually in a lot of pain. Countless Roman citizens and soldiers would not allow him to spare the leader of the enemy forces. For the two men on opposite sides, this was the inevitable outcome. Caesar then pursued the fleeing Pompey all the way to Pharsalus in pursuit of him. There, the two engaged in a fierce battle, known as the Battle of Pharsalus. Pompey was soundly defeated and fled. The victorious Caesar sought information about Pompey's escape from his camp, but unfortunately, he found no clues. However, Caesar did not give up easily and instead placed his hopes on the prisoners. The man named Brutus had a deep grudge against Pompey because his father had been killed by him. Caesar summoned him into the tent, hoping to extract information about Pompey's whereabouts. However, Brutus hoped that Caesar could reconcile with Pompey and jointly rule Rome. For Caesar, his relationship with Pompey was already fragile. The previous peace had merely been maintained through a political marriage. With the death of his daughter, the bond between him and Pompey was completely severed. Brutus quickly betrayed Pompey in hopes of gaining Caesar's mercy and trust. When Caesar learned that Pompey had fled to Egypt, he hastened his pursuit. Pompey, having previously helped the Egyptian king secure his throne, believed he would find refuge there. Instead, he met a meaningless death in Egypt. When Caesar arrived in Egypt, he found only Pompey's severed head. The Egyptian king thought this would please Caesar, but this foolish act only served to infuriate him. Although Pompey was Caesar's political rival, he was also his son-in-law, and only Caesar had the right to execute him. Caesar returned to his quarters and, in a fit of rage, overturned everything on the table. Just then, a mysterious woman in a black robe appeared. She was Cleopatra, known as the Queen of Egypt. She sought out Caesar late at night for a simple reason. She wanted his help to reclaim her throne and promised to offer all of Egypt's wealth in return. However, Caesar did not agree to her terms, so Cleopatra offered herself to him. Thus, Caesar embarked on a campaign in Egypt, leading to the Battle of Alexandria. After this battle, Caesar completely conquered Egypt, and Cleopatra ascended to the throne. From that point on, Caesar held absolute power in both Egypt and Rome, and his authority reached its peak. Not long after, Caesar returned to Rome, and his victories in Egypt elevated his prestige among the Roman people to new heights. Some even spontaneously placed crowns on his statues. This display made the senators feel threatened, and soon Cleopatra appeared before the crowd. When their child was presented, Brutus and Cassius feared that Caesar might abandon the Republic and establish a monarchy. Consequently, they quickly began plotting an assassination. On that day, Brutus concealed a dagger in his sleeve, but his wife saw him. Feeling very puzzled, she decided to follow him to uncover the truth. What she heard next left her in disbelief. Brutus was conspiring with the senators to assassinate Caesar. This overwhelmed Brutus' wife for a moment upon hearing these words. Subsequently, Brutus planned to invite Caesar to the Senate under the pretense of having him read a petition, which essentially requested that he return power to the Senate. However, just as Caesar was about to leave, Calpurnius suddenly appeared before him, trying to prevent him from attending the meeting. She recounted a dream in which she saw Caesar lying in a pool of blood. Upon hearing her words, Brutus displayed a look of panic. Caesar reassured his wife that he would come to find her after the meeting and then departed. Shortly after Caesar's departure, Brutus' wife approached Calpurnia, and she told all about the senators' plot to assassinate Caesar. Meanwhile, Caesar had just arrived at the Senate. He was determined to see what these arrogant men would attempt. However, during the meeting, Caesar did not notice the strange expressions on their faces. The senators began to close in on him. With that, Caesar, who had been stabbed several times, looked incredulously at Brutus, who had thrust his dagger at him. Caesar then gazed at Pompey's statue and realized how similar their fates were. Perhaps at the moment of Pompey's death, he too felt the same despair, both having died at the hands of those they trusted. Soon, Calpurnia rushed to the Senate, only to find her husband barely clinging to life in a pool of blood. Thus, on March 15, 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated at the age of 56. Caesar's life can be described as legendary. He built Rome into the most powerful country in Europe and suppressed rebellions and civil unrest with thundering means. He then conquered Egypt, directly overthrowing the reigning king, and gained widespread support, becoming the lifelong dictator of the Roman Republic. His work, Commentarii de Bello Gallico, Commentaries on the Gallic War, has always been highly regarded by history and military enthusiasts.